There is a mutant in Marvel's files who could only be killed by dragging him outside the universe, because nowhere inside it was safe from him. He is not the strongest name on this countdown of the 10 most terrifying mutants explained. And that is the whole point. Terrifying and powerful are not the same thing. Terrifying is what happens when an ability has no off switch, no cure, and no mercy in it anywhere. So we begin at number 10, with a boy who killed his own father by accident. 10. Wither's hungry touch. Kevin Ford was a teenage artist with a decent life until his mutation woke up. Plants in the garden browned. His clothes started coming apart on his body. He panicked. His father took hold of him to calm him down, and his father crumbled into dust between his hands. Wither's power decays organic matter on contact, and it is involuntary. He cannot switch it off, cannot shake a hand, cannot wear cotton or wool without destroying it. Every fabric he owns has to be synthetic. For a while, he hid in a scrapyard, building sculptures out of scrap metal, because junk was the only company that could not die on him. The nastiest detail is the hunger. Kevin's ability does not sit still inside him. It pushes, it wants to be used, and the longer he refuses it, the louder it gets. A teenager who has already killed a parent by mistake spends every day with something in his skin, actively arguing for a second one. He eventually stopped arguing. Wither joined the psychic vampire Selene as one of her death-powered inner circle, which is exactly where a boy like that ends up when nobody reaches him in time. 9. Emplate eats mutants. Marius St. Croix has mouths in the palms of his hands, not a metaphor. Fanged openings in each hand that he presses against a victim to drain the marrow out of their bones. Only mutant marrow works, and without it he cannot stay in our reality at all. He gets pulled back into an extra-dimensional space where unseen things torture him constantly. Crossing between planes was once described as 1,000 hands tearing at his flesh, which is why he wears a respirator. His first meal was his mother. She was alone in the house the day the hunger arrived, and that was that. His father threw him out without ever learning what had really happened. Then there is what he did to his family. When his sister Monet mocked him and refused to join his plans, he transformed her into the red-skinned, razor-sharp creature called Penance. Then he caged her in his realm as a private food supply, draining her marrow at intervals for months on end. Bishop, arriving from a grim possible future, mentioned that entire hordes of implate-like creatures existed in his timeline. Somebody, somewhere down the line, worked out how to make more of him. That single throwaway line is arguably the bleakest detail in his entire file. 8. Malice wears you. Alice McAllister was 16, arguing with her mother, and wished hard that she was dead. Her mutation obliged. Her body died on the spot, and her mind kept going as a bodiless psionic entity, with nowhere to live except other people. That is Malice. She has no form, no face, no fixed anything. She slips into a host and takes the wheel completely, and the only warning sign is a cameo choker that appears around the victim's throat. Nobody has ever established whether that choker is a real object or something reality invents to mark her presence. Mr. Sinister recruited her into the Marauders, and she went through the X-Men like a coat rack. Dazzler, Wolverine, Rogue. She tried Storm and got thrown straight back out because Storm's will was stronger than her grip. Storm tore the choker off her own throat to do it. Then came Polaris, and Sinister's cruelest move. He knew that Lorna Dane's electromagnetic nature would fuse the two of them permanently, and he sent Malice in anyway without telling her. Malice led the Marauders wearing Lorna's body and Lorna's face, attacking Lorna's own teammates, and could not leave. Lorna was awake in there for all of it. Malice forced her to goad Havoc, the man who loved her, into trying to kill her, purely so he would carry the memory of trying. 7. Selena never dies. Selene Gallio was born roughly 17,000 years ago in Central Europe, in the stretch of prehistory the comics describe as after the oceans swallowed Atlantis. She has been feeding ever since. She is a psychic vampire in the most literal sense. Skin contact lets her pull the life force straight out of a person, rejuvenating herself while the victim ages, withers, and collapses into dust in seconds. She can drain partially instead, leaving the survivor alive and obedient to her. She can also choose how old she appears, which means the harmless elderly woman on the corner or the small girl asking for help might be her. She once spent a stretch hiding among ordinary people in Mutant Town, and the bodies piled up around her without anyone connecting them. As the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club, she spent centuries treating civilizations as crop rotation. Her most ambitious move came when her servant Eli Bard used a techno-organic virus to reanimate the mutant dead, including the enormous graveyard of Genosha, where 16 million had already been slaughtered. Selene raised them, then reaped their souls to make herself a god. It worked. She ascended. Warpath then put a blade in her, which is a strange way for a god to go. Jokes aside, the most unsettling part came afterwards. Krakoa let her in and gave her a job monitoring the island's psychic energy levels. 6. Vulcan burns everything. Gabriel Summers never had a chance to be anything else. His mother was pregnant with him when the Shi'ar seized the Summers family, and the Emperor Deken murdered her while the child was still inside her. Gabriel was cut out of her body and dropped into an incubation accelerator, a machine that force-grows slaves, which aged him to adolescence before he had lived a single day. He was raised as property, shipped to Earth to serve the Emperor's agent. When he finally reached Earth and joined a rescue mission that went catastrophically wrong, Charles Xavier surgically erased him from Cyclops' memory to spare his star pupil the truth. Gabriel spent years buried inside his own brother's head as a hole where a person used to be, alive and forgotten at the same time. What came back was Vulcan, and Vulcan is an energy manipulator who cut through the Shi'ar Imperial Guard, threw Xavier into the Macrane crystal, burned the flesh from Deken's bones, and crowned himself Emperor of the Shi'ar. Then his father Corsair looked at him during the fighting and ordered him, as his father, to stop the senseless slaughter. Vulcan killed him where he stood. No hesitation, no speech, no flicker of the boy Moira MacTaggert once took in. That is what separates him from every other angry powerhouse. Ferocious as he is, Vulcan's rage is loud, and loud things can be seen coming. 5. Sinister's cold patience. Now for the pick that will start an argument. Nathaniel Essex was a Victorian biologist, and he was not born a mutant at all. Apocalypse remade him, and Essex spent the following century splicing stolen mutant DNA into himself, until Krakoa formally recognized him as one of them and handed him a seat on its ruling council. Plenty of readers insist that disqualifies him on the spot. The comics disagreed, and so does this list, because the argument misses why he is frightening. What earns his place is method. Sinister does not rampage. He runs orphanages so he can raise a child whose bloodline he wants. He worked the death camps under a false name, taking blood samples from children in exchange for sweets. He cloned Jean Grey, produced Madeline Pryor, installed false memories in her, programmed her to fall in love with Scott Summers, and arranged their meeting so that the resulting baby would carry the genetics he needed. He sent the Marauders into the Morlock tunnels to butcher a community of homeless mutants for their genes. He has hidden backup copies of his own mind inside other people's heads, including a young Charles Xavier, so that killing him accomplishes nothing at all. Beat him and you have beaten a shell. Somewhere else, a version of him is already awake, already ahead, already tending a bloodline nobody has noticed yet. Cold as Sinister is, he still needs a laboratory. 4. Shadow King waits. What if the encounter that inspired the X-Men was also the worst mistake Charles Xavier ever made? Amal Farouk ran the thieves of Cairo's back streets, and when a young Xavier crossed him, the two telepaths fought a duel on the astral plane. Xavier won and killed Farouk's body. That was the mistake. The body was never the problem. Farouk carried on as a mind with no flesh to lose, and later writers made him older and worse than anyone realized. The Shadow King is presented as a multiversal manifestation of the darkness inside human consciousness, riding hosts since the dawn of our species, and Farouk was merely the vessel that stuck. He came to a boy who had lost everything to plague, and offered him the one thing nobody else could, never being alone again. On Krakoa, he sat among the young mutants he had tormented, saying all the right things, working them from the inside. Insidious as that is, the Shadow King needs a mind to climb into. 3. Proteus unmakes reality. Moira MacTaggert's son spent roughly a decade sealed in a cell on Muir Island, and the staff were only ever told he was Mutant X. His name was Kevin. She built that cell herself. She loved him, and she understood exactly what would happen the day it failed. Proteus is not a man with an ability. He is psionic energy in a rough human shape, with no body of his own, and what he does to the world around him barely qualifies as fighting. He bends space and gravity, conjures matter out of nothing, reshapes existing objects and people into whatever amuses him, and switches off other powers in his vicinity. Reality near him behaves like something painted by a madman. Because that energy cannot sit inside living tissue for long, he possesses people and burns through them. Each host withers, ages, and dies, and the harder he uses his powers, the faster it happens. When he finally escaped, he left a trail of discarded corpses along the road to Edinburgh, walking towards the father who never knew he existed, intending to wear him. His only real weakness is metal, which is why Colossus was the one who ended him, killing a reality warper with nothing more sophisticated than his own steel skin. 2. Legion's Thousand Minds. David Haller was 10 years old when an assassination squad broke into his family's home and murdered his stepfather while he watched. His telepathy detonated, destroyed the attackers, and dragged their dying thoughts and terror into him as they went. A child's mind is not built to hold that. His shattered Legion is the son of Charles Xavier, and he is an Omega-level mutant whose fractured psyche split into separate personalities, each one holding a distinct power. Not variations of the same gift, different abilities entirely. Running on different personalities, with the actual David rarely in control of which one is currently driving. The count has grown into the hundreds and arguably the thousands. The horror is not the damage he causes when he turns. It is what he wrecks while trying to help. Wanting to make his father's dream come true, David traveled back through time to remove Magneto before he could ever turn against his father. He missed. He killed Charles Xavier instead, and the shockwave rewrote everything into the Age of Apocalypse. A son destroyed a universe reaching for his father's approval, and the bleakest part is that he was not even angry when he did it. 1. Jaspers rewrites Britain. Sir James Jaspers was a British politician who won office campaigning against superhumans, while being an Omega-level reality-warping mutant himself. The crusade was never principled. It was clearing out the competition, and he ran it while giving speeches about honesty. His counterpart on a neighboring Earth got there first, that Jaspers commissioned the Fury, an adapting symbiote, with one purpose, and it hunted down and killed every superhuman on the planet, programmed to spare only its creator. Then his mind opened properly, and a wave of unreality rolled across everything. An outside authority destroyed that entire universe rather than risk the madness spreading. The version who grew up in the main Marvel reality was worse. He became Prime Minister, unleashed the Jaspers warp across the country, had heroes rounded up, twisted ordinary children into unstable creatures called warpies, and turned a woman into a literal fox because the pun entertained him. He built a gang of storybook lunatics for company and tortured Captain Britain with false memories out of boredom. Nothing stopped him, vaporized him, and he rebuilt his body from scratch. He was finally killed only when the Fury, having crossed over from the world it had already emptied, dragged him bodily outside the universe, into a place with nothing left for him to bend. Want more of your favorite X-Men? Don't miss every power Mr. Sinister has in X-Men Explained. Terror in these books was never about raw power output. It is about the ones who cannot be reasoned with, cured, or safely locked away, because the thing making them dangerous is the same thing keeping them alive. Several of them are still walking around Marvel's pages today, sitting on councils and wearing perfectly friendly faces. Hope you found this video helpful.